G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 106, and of course with the end of round 2 coming into round 3, a lot to talk about today. Going to take a look at some news regarding the Gabba and the Brisbane Lions playing at a new home ground in 2033, so in a couple of years time, that's 5 or 6 years. A lot of injury news to cover. Of course, we've got our AFL Fantasy and AFL preview to round 3 to break down. So let's not waste any more of your time. Let's roll the intro and get straight into it. Welcome to the Boundary Riders podcast, your one-stop shop for all your AFL content needs. He looks at his options and Jack Ginnivan says, boys, you brought me to the club to do just this! But this guy has Flog written all over him.
From attack down, Reed sprints away from Petrarca, leaves him in his wake, takes a second bounce, takes a third. The sheer arrogance of Harley Reid. Finish the job, young man!
So let's get into the footy news from the week that was. But guys, back in the team this week is my brother. He decided to join us, decided to grace us with his presence. A couple of weeks away, I think that's been 2 weeks, and now you're back. So, Port Adelaide, big win against Richmond last week. I saw you...
Premiership favourites again.
I saw you, refreshing the Ticketek, seeing if the grand final tickets were going on sale yet.
Oh, yeah,
unfortunately, they haven't been done yet.
And, I think we're back to our best.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how we expected Richmond to be this year.
Yeah, I 100%.
The grand scheme of things, I feel like they're going to be on the back of a few beltings.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be the worst of it, that game against Port Adelaide. I feel like there will be a couple of, absolute thrashings.
Oh, you'd expect at least 1 or 2 100-point losses, I expect, by the end of the year.
Yeah. But, look, I think they definitely have some players to go off of, and I don't think they're going to be too concerned going into the next couple of years. I feel like they have a lot to build off of, and hopefully they can get some wins on the board. So they're not just... if they can compete every most weeks, then I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
If they're going to play... against Port Adelaide, I feel like they were okay, but they just couldn't get their hands on the footy, and Port Adelaide just... kept it away from them.
They started slow, and against a Port team that were coming off that needed to respond, Port weren't going to relent their pressure and stuff.
Yeah, I forgot to say, I should have said it in the podcast last week, but I said it when the game was starting. I said Port Adelaide, they're going to beat it by 10 plus goals. Port Adelaide is such a response team, and that's kind of how it went. But, I can't really claim that too much because I didn't say it here. If I said that here, I would have been, pretty chuffed with myself, but... I did say it to you before the game, and you were like, "Well, I'm pretty nervous," and I'm like, "You're gonna kill them by 10 goals. This is what's gonna happen."
It's the same thing with all the teams I follow around the world. It's just like I'm never confident when it comes to.
You don't want to be
winning.
overconfident. I
No,
guess.
you don't want to be overconfident. The last time that happened is not a great prelim 2021.
2021 was the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I was super confident in that.
Oh, was that 2020?
No, it's 21 because that's when they went on to go to the premiership against Melbourne.
Well, lost the grand final.
Well, yeah, but they still went on to go to get into the grand final.
Yeah,
that's the last time I was ever super confident about Port Adelaide.
Never again.
Never again under Ken Ingley.
Anyway, let's move into some news to cover over the weekend. A lot of injury updates coming through. First of all, Jack Lukosius has been ruled out for an extended period after suffering a fractured kneecap. That sounds fucking dreadful.
I don't know how that's going to be. That's an extended period. You expect to be 3 to 4 months at least.
I heard some news regarding it that the night after the game, the night of the game after it, apparently it just swelled up massively and I had to go to hospital.
And he had to release all the fluid.
Oh, that's fucking
yeah, I
gross.
know.
Anyway,
I just
hopefully he can return soon because Port Adelaide's tall socks now, especially up forward, are diminishing by the day.
Finlayson was dropped last week, so there's questions that he'll come back in. Ollie Lord's there, and then you've got some debutants really that you could bring in.
Yeah, just maybe chuck one in. But Port Adelaide, they've got a. Do you remember who they play this week? They play.
They play Essendon on Thursday, and then they play...
Makes it interesting.
Then they play the Saints before gather round against Hawthorn.
So a couple of interesting games to come up. Yeah. On Essendon, Elijah Sardis and Archie Perkins have both been ruled out for this week and potentially next week as well. 2 young up-and-comers. A little bit disappointing on Essendon. We are going to talk about them a bit later as well, but broken hand to Elijah Sardis while... Archie Perkins has done a quad. Interesting with Elijah Sardis. He hasn't had a very big start to the actual season. He had a very good pre-season, good match simulation. I guess it's kind of how Essendon were, though. We were all expecting some interest. I mean, a lot of people fell into the trap of watching their pre-season games and falling for that, but I picked them 17th, and right now I'm kind of looking like I saw that coming. They're looking very poor.
I want to see their response this week, and of course it's against Port Adelaide, which is not great for me, but you want to see them be more competitive than they have been in the first two weeks. Really, they played well in the first round against Hawthorn, but
yeah, I mean they had chances to potentially win that game if they actually took some chances rather than wasting them. And Hawthorn went down the other end and just were too good.
Clinical.
Yeah. Adam Treloar, unfortunately, has suffered a setback with his calf. It does seem that he's going to be missing yet another month with a calf strain. So the Bulldogs are performing okay, but you want to have those big players back.
You want them to come back before they're mid-season, because then you want to get them 2 months of good game time before the finals. So,
well, considering at the moment, I feel like Luke Beveridge is kind of, with all these injuries, is a blessing in disguise, because now he's had to basically go with a squad that he has to go with every week and not swap and change them.
Yeah.
It seems like they're kind of settled. I mean, it's only 2 rounds, but even against Collingwood last week, I mean, let's be honest, if it wasn't for the umpiring, they would have won that game.
Yeah.
Anyway. Also, on Tom Stewart, there is some good news here for the Cats. It does seem that is a sigh of relief for the Cats. He has been cleared of any significant knee damage. Scans have revealed it is a low-grade PCL injury. He remains an outside chance to play on Saturday night against the Brisbane Lions. I feel like you take the cautious approach.
You have to take the cautious approach with Tom Stewart. I think you're taking 2 weeks and bring him back.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys didn't see the tips, we'll be playing that for the podcast a little bit later, but their record, I believe, with Tom Stewart out is 1 win, 6 losses. So, I mean, he doesn't miss many games, but when he does, Geelong don't play their greatest. So, they did have Connor O'Sullivan play in that back 50 on Saturday night against St Kilda, and he showed some good signs. And Closey came on as the sub, and he had a very good performance as well. But I mean, you can't replace Tom Stewart with a couple of kids.
Well, O'Sullivan did get the nomination for this week Rising Star,
which I thought was a bit.
Which I don't agree with. It should have been the West Coast player in Terrell Dewar.
Yeah.
I think he should have deserved the nomination, but I think O'Sullivan has played well in the first 2 weeks of the season. So,
I mean, he's done well, and we'll see So Lawler got the first one, O'Sullivan got the second one. We'll see how, because I mean, this has been a pretty big draft on coming through so far. A lot of the players have impressed in their first couple of games. Xavier Lindsay as well could have got it. He had a pretty decent performance against North Melbourne. So a couple of other ones that could be getting them in the future. And then the final injury update I wanted to give, this was a little bit earlier. This was on Saturday afternoon, I believe. But Reef McGuinness has been confirmed to have done an ACL. So that's really sad news for him, because he finally got into the team. He's been sitting in the periphery for quite a while now for the Pies, but now, unfortunately, going to miss a whole year.
Yeah, sad.
So sad news for Reef McGuinness. Let's move on, talk about the news regarding Brisbane Lions' new home ground, it looks like. So the new Brisbane Stadium is to be built at Victoria Park in Queensland. Absolutely no fucking idea where the hell that is. Isn't the MCG near Victoria Park in Melbourne? Yeah. I feel like that's... I thought for a minute, I looked at it for a second, I'm like, hang on a minute. They're moving back with Fitzroy, but anyway. The Queensland government have announced there will be a new Brisbane Stadium built at Victoria Park for the 2032 Olympics. With a capacity of 60,000, it will be the home of AFL and cricket. Meanwhile, the Gabba will be coming down to make way for an urban renewal after 2032. So that sounds like it's going to be a big wank fest, wherever the hell that's going to be. I'm assuming they're just going to build housing and that sort of stuff where the Gabba's going to be, similar to what they did with Amy Stadium here in South Australia. This is said by the Premier of Queensland in David Crisafulli, my goat. I love him. I think he's my favourite Premier in this country. I feel like it's overdue. I feel like looking at the Gabba, they need a new stadium. I mean, I think another issue with Brisbane is a lot of the Queensland don't actually agree with the idea. They didn't want a new stadium because it costs too much. Another issue with that is Tasmania obviously had a big issue with having a new stadium rather than redeveloping the one they had. So apparently that seems like they're in vogue, I guess, is no longer do you redevelop a stadium, you build a new one.
I think, well, when it comes to the Gabba, I've heard a lot of people that have been there think it's really shit. from others.
So you've heard other people. I've never really heard anyone talk about it. I've never really heard like face to face someone talk about it. Have they said exactly what their issue is with the ground? Or
the seating's very small together. You feel like you're like sardines in a can.
They're very close together.
Very close together. It hasn't been redeveloped in a long time. I know that.
Yeah, I do know that too. I guess Adelaide Oval was a redevelopment, but I mean, even though it was a redevelopment, it was basically a new ground, really. The Adelaide Oval that used to be is hugely different than what it is now. But I guess, since then we've had, that's pretty much, I can't remember another redevelopment.
SCG got a new stand.
Oh, they got that new stand, yeah. No, I guess the GMHBA did get that new stand as well. But not like a full redevelopment. I mean, Adelaide Oval got a huge revamp. I think Brisbane just needed a new stadium in general, especially because they host so much up there in sport. You got cricket. It's not like Tasmania. I feel like in a way they kind of had to get a new stadium because of the weather. They're having a full AFL team now, but they don't really host. They didn't really host that much sporting events. The Gabba does. Yeah, and Brisbane do.
You got to think of also like entertainment and stuff. Like if you have a 60,000 capacity stadium, more. Even other just events in general, not just sporting events, just...
Yeah, because I don't think the Gabba holds more than 40. I don't think. Is it 40? It's either 40 or 50,000.
No, it's 40. It's definitely under 40.
I guess a lot of the reason as well why the Gabba hasn't really needed to redevelop is they only really, for a long time, the only sport they really had that was really popular was cricket, and footy took a long time to get bigger.
And rugby as well.
Yeah, rugby's obviously taken over.
That's what they've got Suncorp for.
Yeah, I mean that holds 90,000. There's no real need to redevelop or do anything to the Gabba when how many times has the Gabba been filled up with Brisbane Lions fans? Not very often. No. So that's probably why they probably haven't really felt the need. But I guess now with Brisbane starting to be a much more popular team, I think they're going to continue to grow quite quickly if they stay up the top of the ladder and footy continues to grow in Queensland. And I think it is probably now that it is a good idea with the Olympics coming up that you do move the Brisbane Lions over to this new stadium.
Well, the thing is also like this new development, it's an extra 20,000 seats. I'm just saying that how many times are they going to sell out that at a Brisbane game? I'm really just going to say it like they didn't.
Well, it is 7-8 years in the future. I don't know. I mean, in big finals, I guess is probably the idea. And I feel like at this point, I know it's a very long time, and I know a lot of people would hate me for saying this, but if it does get to a point where the AFL wants to become a lot more fairer for these interstate teams, I still don't like it at this moment, but have a grand final outside of Melbourne. Now, I know that's a big call, and I know people are going to hate me for that, and I still currently don't think it should be a thing. I think we should have the grand final at the MCG. But if teams start to have big grounds that can accommodate for a grand final, I feel like that's fair enough if they are like the best team there. I still don't think it's fair at the moment though, and I don't think even if they did build the Queensland Stadium to be 60,000, I still think there's other teams that don't have a big enough stadium to accommodate for that. Talking about the Sydney Swans, SCG 40,000, you need more than that for a grand final. Even Adelaide Oval, I don't think 50,000 is enough necessarily. I think you'd have to go at least to 70.
I think it holds 53,000 Adelaide.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel Stadium holds nearly that much. So I feel like you'd need at least 60, 70,000 at a ground, especially for a state like SA. Queensland I kind of get because it is still a rugby state. But if they're going to put a grand final in South Australia or something, you'd have to find another 20,000 seats somewhere. Yeah. Let's move on. Let's talk about the talk of the town, the team who is on a rebuild or, are fine, it's all good, put your heads in the sand, is Essendon.
Oh, I thought it was all about West Coast. I guess they're both the same, aren't they?
I guess West Coast are doing okay. I mean, they nearly beat Brisbane up at the Gabba. I'd give them that. They've done better than Essendon and Carlton. Anyway, Essendon, a lot of talk over the week has been regarding their list at the moment with their draft picks that they've been picking up and arguably have failed or have just not been living up to what most people have expected. And recently, Brad Scott was on AFL 360, I believe it was on Monday night. And on an interview, he recently said, after being asked a question about if the team is in rebuild mode. He said, I wouldn't concede that we're not capable of competing every week. Call it potential or call it capability, but we've got to get to the best out of our capability at the moment. So I feel like he's dodging around the question. He doesn't want to say
that's a political answer. That's
Yeah.
not actually answering the question.
Yeah. And then when he said regarding the off-season that they just had, he said that we have made some changes at the end of last year with the personnel. List chose to go with the list, go to the draft, and he's pretty clear as to what that looks like from people.
Rebuild.
Which makes it look like a rebuild. Now, I wanted to bring a new segment to the show, or to the channel, or to the podcast, what you want to call it. We're only going to be doing this segment when you're here, because it's going to be a bit awkward if I do it. But the segment is called Overreact or Fair Enough. So basically, I'm going to give you a couple of statements from the week from the media, or statements that I'm thinking are true, and you're going to tell me if that's an overreaction, or if you think that's a fair call to make. Essendon needs a rebuild. Is that an overreaction from people, or do you think that's a fair call?
Fair. Cool.
You think it's a fair call?
Yeah.
Okay. I will sit there and say yes. However, I think that if you lose your two best forwards, I think most teams would struggle. They've lost Kyle Langford and Peter Wright. One's had a 50-plus goal season. Two of them, actually. I think both of them have had 50-plus goal seasons. You're losing 100 goals a season right there. And I think that's a big issue. However, on the side of, yes, I agree with it, their defence is fucking woeful.
Oh, they've... I think I saw a stat since the turn of 2000, they've only had a top 6 lists defence once.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's horrible.
They've
Horrible.
They've had an attack, I think, 8 times. I think
Yeah.
is, and I mean, even that's not that good.
That's not good, but having 1 year out of 25, well, 24, because it's not based on this year, out of 24 years, that's really poor.
Yeah, it's not good enough for a team that's still, I mean, most successful team in VFL AFL history when you look at premierships, which I still think is a bit of a joke now. There's no point looking at that when Carlton and Essendon are the most successful teams in the AFL, considering
they've got nothing since 2000.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that really matters. But anyway, I've got a couple more for you. Next one. Sam Darcy can win the Coleman medal this year. Is that an overreaction, or do you think that's fair?
Overreaction.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's just too early. I think 2 more years. I think
he looked good on Friday.
He looked good.
I'm sure he looked
good. But everyone's been saying, Collingwood's defense isn't as good as what it normally is, what other teams have been. And who they play week 1? They played
North Melbourne.
Well,
and he didn't really do that well against North either. So.
I think he's getting there. I think he just needs to bulk up a bit more. So
the one thing is though, he is so fucking tall, and he's a forward.
Yeah.
He is built as a forward, so no defender can reach his height when he gets tall. When he's got his hands up in the air.
Yeah.
He just needs to do a little skip, and he's taller than everyone else in the game.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, he's still playing a little bit of ruck, isn't he? So
yeah.
I think doing that will hamper him from winning it, because there's times that he won't be able to kick goals with being a ruckman all the time. So
at the moment, he has 5 goals this season.
Yeah.
Nick Larkey currently leads the Coleman from 2 games, I guess. He's got 8 goals, so he's probably up there with a chance. And if North Melbourne continue to, that's a bit of an overreaction. North Melbourne, are back. If they win 8 wins, 10 wins this season, North Melbourne, I think that can happen. Nick Larkey most likely wins the Coleman medal. And I think that recruitment of Jack Darling, even though some people, and probably me myself, thinking that was not a good call, he is taking a defender away. So, not a bad call. And then the final one was going to ask you, Harley Reid will be the first $2 million player. Is that an overreaction?
That's an overreaction by a long shot. Because I think that's going to be Sam Darcy.
So you think Sam Darcy will be the first one?
I think so at the moment. I think because they'll lose Jamara, so they'll lose all that. They might pay him out for a bit, but they'll lose all that cash.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Now, on the first couple of weeks talking about Harley Reid, do you think that he's getting a little bit hard done by media-wise, or do you think that he needs to grow up a bit?
I think it's a bit of both. I think, the reaction he gave to the Brisbane fans was, I think, necessary. I really do. I think that people like them coming over the fence with tissues and shit like that is overreaction by them. But he gave away 7 free kicks on the weekend.
Yeah.
Like, that's not great. That's very undisciplined. That he needs to show a bit of needs to pull his head in a bit.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, to be honest, I thought it was pretty funny when he did gave the crowd the finger. I thought that was funny. I didn't have an issue with that. To be honest, like I don't think the Brisbane supporters should be doing that. But I also think it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I know it probably too much, but you know, I mean, let's be honest. I've done a couple of things at an AFL game that I probably would be. Maybe don't do that, but
I remember some of those.
Yeah,
but
so
I will say this is that I think it's funny how like Caroline Wilson and all that's come out the last week saying, "Oh, maybe we've been a bit too harsh." It's like you're the ones that have been doing it the entire time.
Yeah.
It's not like me and you have been doing it.
Yeah.
Saying, "Oh, he's pathetic. He needs to show a bit. He needs to pull his head in." It's all these people around the AFL media that are putting it on him.
Yeah, the
And
guy
they're
2
like,
seats over from you in your TV show has been the one who's been with his biggest
and they're like,
critic.
"Oh, sorry, we didn't mean it like that." It's
Yeah.
like, oh, and I think what Nick Raywalt was saying on the same thing is like, oh, well, he needs to deal with it. It's like, it's like, because you've been in America the last 2 years, what, you don't think nothing's changed?
yeah,
It's probably the first time he's ever seen Harley Reid live.
yeah,
He's come
true.
back now, so...
Yeah, I mean, he's probably he hasn't. I don't even think he would have seen him live yet, depending on where he's commentating on the radio. So
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think it is a bit of an over. I think a lot of it is a huge overreaction, and I think that's going to be the issue going into. You know, Channel 7 now have got 4 different shows. They didn't have one at all. Oh, they had one. They had Talking Footy.
Yeah, they had one.
That was it. And then they had like that after Friday night show that was on their 7 Plus app or something. Experts that no one gave a fuck about. Who the hell watched that? Now they've got 4 different shows, and Fox Footy got all their shows as well. So there is going to be a lot more media speculation on TV and around social media now, because simply there is just stuff they need to talk about.
Yeah.
And a little bit of blown out of proportion. But I mean, I don't necessarily mind more media talk like on the AFL. I don't mind that, but I do think there needs to be a line where we go, okay, maybe that's a bit of an overreaction.
Yeah.
I think that's where our new segment comes in, where we're calling this out. All right. So you've gone with it's a fair call on Essendon needing to rebuild.
Yeah.
An overreaction on Sam Darcy for the Coleman medal, and a fair overreaction on Harley Reid being the $2 million player.
Yeah.
Basically, because you think Sam Darcy will be that player.
Yeah. Like, we've seen Harley Reid at his best. Even live, we've seen him at his best.
Yeah, we saw him. We saw he's probably his best. Well, not his best game, but we saw it. It was his first good game. He took him a couple of games, but that first game in Adelaide in Gather Round last year was a very good performance from him.
So we've seen him at his best, but at the moment he's in a slump.
Yeah, and I mean he's played no more than 30 games.
Yeah.
So I mean it's going to take him time. So I do think, and I don't like the idea of people saying that he's avoid from criticism. He can't be criticised, because I think that's not a good precedent to make.
Yeah,
he is a professional.
It's not like he's Nick Dacos and he does get away with all of it.
Yeah, and I mean there was a couple of issues like on Channel 9. I think it was this weekend on the Footy Show. Matthew Lloyd calling out Will Ashcroft for playing for getting extra handballs and stuff like that. I mean, if you're going to call out Will Ashcroft for giving disposals to then get it back, that is a Nick Dacos special, which is fine. I mean, whatever. But I mean, don't call one player out for it and then not another.
Yeah.
You can't.
Because
I think that's unfair.
For one thing, one's one Norm Smith, one hasn't.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, anyway. That's pretty much all of that segment. Make sure to let us know down below, guys, if you think that's a segment we should keep around. I will be doing that segment when you are here. I can't really ask over... I mean, I guess I could do that by myself, but I mean, I think it's better when it's a conversation. So let us know how you feel about that. But now, guys, let's get into the preview to round 3. And we'll start with the Carlton v Bulldogs game. Massive game for both sides. The Bulldogs did get a good win in round 1 against North Melbourne. Last week, we're pretty close to beating Collingwood. However, they just couldn't hold on in the final quarter, just couldn't get in front. But Carlton, on the other hand, they are all at sea. It's a real question mark about Carlton's forward line. Who's going to kick a goal? Curnow still looked very underdone last week. Maybe a week in the team will help him. I still think there's a lot of other issues in their forward line. Who's going to kick other goals for them? Patrick Cripps is single-handedly keeping them in games at the moment, and they need to find other avenues to goal right now, Carlton. They honestly don't look like beating anyone at the moment, and I mean, that proved pretty well true when they lost to Richmond in round 1. So Carlton, the biggest question mark for them is their forward line. Who's going to kick their goals? I'm not too sure. And the Bulldogs, honestly, I don't have a lot of question marks going into this game. I think their forward line has been very good in the first couple of weeks. I think their midfield has been above par, in my opinion, especially with losing Treloar and Bontempelli before the start of the season. For them to have performed so well in the first couple of weeks, I don't have many question marks about that. Maybe their defence, however, I don't really trust Carlton's forward line, so I don't really think there's a lot of question marks on that defence for the Bulldogs. And that is why I'm tipping the Bulldogs. I think it's very unreliable about Carlton going into this season. I can't pick where they're going to win this game. Patrick Cripps is going to have to single-handedly drag them over the line if there's any chance, and I can't see him being able to do that. De Koning has been very good as well. However, I think they need more than 2 players to come along with them to get a win here. And I think the Bulldogs have been very good. They've actually really impressed me in the first couple of weeks of the season. So I'm going to be going the Bulldogs. After that, we get to Saturday afternoon. Interesting game, this one. Melbourne up against the Gold Coast Suns. This is at the MCG. Now, the Gold Coast proved that they could win away from home in their first matchup against the West Coast Eagles in one of the biggest trips in the AFL calendar. They performed brilliantly in that game. Now they have to beat another hoodoo that they have winning at the MCG. Now, the Gold Coast looked a very different team this year from what they did last year. Looked like a very well-suited lineup with Damien Hardwick seemingly having his game plan get into full action now. Seemed like he had a few teething issues in his first year, Damien Hardwick, but in that first game, the Gold Coast were brilliant, and it was only against the West Coast Eagles, but I still think the Gold Coast, after that first performance, they could be in for a big year. On Melbourne's point of view, they were brilliant against the Giants in round 1, but against North Melbourne, their midfield got smashed. It's a midfield that's got Max Gawn, Petrarca, Viney, and Oliver got smashed by North Melbourne. Now, granted, North Melbourne's best line is probably their midfield, but Melbourne can't lose those sort of battles. They have to win in the midfield if they're going to win games. And if they don't win that, they're going to struggle because their forward line just doesn't have the goal-kicking power that they really need to be a top 8 team, Melbourne, at the moment. So, with that being said, I'm actually going to be tipping the Gold Coast. That may be a bit of a big call because it is at the MCG. I think this Gold Coast team is a lot different than what we've seen in the past. I think they're tough in the midfield. That's where I think they can match Melbourne. And if they can just get it forward enough, I think they kick a winning score. I'm very confident that they're going to win this. And Melbourne, if they can pull this win off, I will actually give them a lot of credit because I think the Gold Coast on paper are a better team, and I think they should be winning this game. If the Gold Coast want to be serious about going into this season as a contender for a top 8 final spot, then they need to win this game. But before we go any further, a message from me. If you guys enjoy the content and you want to see more, then make sure to become a member on the channel today. For just $4 a month, you can get early access to video essays, access to live recordings of the Boundary Riders podcast, along with exclusive stream perks and much more. And something that I'm super excited to introduce to channel membership this year is the members vote. Every week with the review, you can cast your vote to have your say on the Boundary Riders medal. So for all that and more, click the link down below, and for the added bonus of getting an extra inch onto your member, then do it now. But anyway, let's get back into the content. After that, we get to the top of the table clash. 2 undefeated sides, Hawthorn up against the Giants. Massive contest being played down in Tasmania. And really, I think this game is 50-50. Hawthorn's midfield matches pretty nicely with Giants' midfield. Both forward lines are potent at the moment. It looks like GWS should be able to get back probably Jesse Hogan and maybe even Jake Stringer for his first game as well, which would be very interesting. And both defenses are extremely solid. We've seen Sam Taylor in the last couple of weeks show why they need him in the team for 22 games of the season because he is so important to their lineup. And Hawthorn's point of view, their new recruits in Barras and Battle have been brilliant for them and just add another strength to their very illustrious bow, I guess, for the Hawthorn Football Club. The only reason I can split these teams is where it's being played in Tasmania. So that's why I'm going to be going with Hawthorn. I do think the last couple of weeks the Hawks haven't been at their best. I feel like an opening round against the Swans, that's the best we've seen of them so far. However, in the last couple of weeks, even against Carlton last week, they weren't really at their greatest, but they just found a way to win that game. I do think down in Tasmania, I believe the Hawks will just be a little bit too strong. They know the ground very well, and I think the Giants are going to struggle going down there, especially after the bye. I think they'll have a couple of cobwebs to blow out. So I think it'll be close. These two teams have a pretty decent rivalry growing and very close contest between them both. However, I will be going with Hawthorn just on the fact that it's been playing in Tasmania. But what a game it's going to be. And unfortunately, because of the rescheduled game of the Brisbane v Geelong, This game will be played at the same time as another great contest between the Lions and the Cats. Brisbane have looked okay in their first couple of games of the season. I don't think it's anything to write home about because they really haven't performed a full four-quarter performance just yet. They had a decent second half against the Swans and ran over the top of them, which was a good performance. And West Coast last week, they had a really poor start. West Coast kicked the first 5 goals of this game. And if they were playing pretty much any other team, the Lions, I think they would have lost last week. Playing at home against West Coast, they got a bit lucky that in the second half they were able to find what they needed to get that win. I think that is a good sign of a team that they are finding a way to win even when they're not playing at their very best. And if they could bank a couple of wins at the start of the season, the Lions, we already know they don't even have to make the top 4 to be a premiership threat. Geelong last week, what a shock loss it was against St Kilda. They were smashed around the ground. St Kilda were just simply too quick for them, and Geelong have got a couple of question marks now. So looking at the game, I'm going to be tipping Brisbane. Now, the reason why I'm tipping Brisbane is because the one thing that caught the Cats off guard last week was the Saints' speed. As soon as the St Kilda got it out into space, they were too quick for Geelong, which has always been a question mark with the Cats, especially the last couple of years. However, the Cats have just been simply good enough to keep it in tight. And with the recruit of Bailey Smith this year, we saw him in round 1 absolutely dominate against Fremantle. And then with a pseudo laid out, and that really did cost them in the end. And in my opinion, I actually think if the Lions can get this on the outside, I think they'll win this one pretty comfortably in the end, because Bailey Smith is a bit 50-50 for this game. So is Tom Stewart. Now, my brother has actually gone Geelong in this game. He has said that they were absolutely dominated last week and they should respond. And the one thing that he's put a pointer against the Brisbane Lions is the fact that they have started poorly. And if they don't get a good start against the Cats, then they will struggle to catch back against a quality side, which I do tend to see. But I believe the Brisbane Lions are just starting to work into their season at the moment. With that being said, let's get to our tips. So my tips for round 3 are Port Adelaide to beat Essendon, the Bulldogs to beat Carlton, the Gold Coast to beat Melbourne, St Kilda to beat Richmond, Hawthorn to beat the Giants, Brisbane to beat Geelong, Adelaide to beat North Melbourne, and Fremantle to win against the Eagles. And my brother's tips for round 3 are Port Adelaide to beat Essendon, Western Bulldogs to beat Carlton, Gold Coast to beat Melbourne, St Kilda to beat Richmond, Hawthorn to beat GWS, Geelong to beat Brisbane, Adelaide to beat North Melbourne, and Fremantle to win in the derby against the West Coast Eagles. So now we get to the certainty pick. If you don't know, me and my brother have been making a certainty tip every single week so far this season. I lost mine last week. I picked Fremantle in a certainty to beat the Swans. Unfortunately, well, I can't say too unfortunately because I'm glad the Swans finally got their first win of the season. But unfortunately, on the certainty pick side, Fremantle lost that game. So that means that I've got a second chili to eat at the end of the season. Every single certainty pick me and my brother get wrong will be a chili that we have to eat at the Boundary Riders Medal live stream at the end of the year. At the moment, I've got 2. He's got 1 wrong. If you don't know how the certainty pick works, you have to pick a team from the previous week that lost to win the upcoming round. So I got the first pick this week. I have said that Fremantle will beat West Coast, and my brother has said that the Bulldogs will beat Carlton as our certainty picks going into round 3. But with that being said, guys, the final part of the preview to round 3 is, of course, to take a look at our tipping comp ladder. So at the moment, the leader of our tipping comp is the Top Dog, and second is Lucas M. Now, those two have used their Joker, so that's kind of why they're sitting up the top at the moment, because, I mean, Lucas only got 4 last week, which isn't the greatest, but that does turn into 8. The current top place without a use of the Joker is my brother in third. Now, I'm getting a bit annoyed because he's dominating AFL Fantasy against me as well, so I'm just kind of had enough of him. I don't really want to see him anymore. He's kind of pissed me off. I currently sit in 16th, which is about middle of the range. We've got about 30 people inside the tipping comp this year. I got 5. I missed a couple last week, especially on Sunday. And I think everyone missed the St Kilda game. But on Sunday, North Melbourne beat Melbourne. I tipped Melbourne in that game. And of course, the Fremantle game I missed as well. So it's a bit unfortunate on my end. But nonetheless, at the moment, the Top Dog leads the AFL tipping comp for the channel. So now, guys, with that being done and dusted, we've got my brother's segment, of course, my Jackpot Junkies Bets Live.
You thought of a name yet?
Well, it wasn't that.
It wasn't going to be that. All right, anyway. We've obviously got your segment going with the betting. Of course, the Thursday night contest between Essendon and Port Adelaide is the spotlight of the betting. Have you got us a little bet that you can give us now that will just a podcast exclusive? Or a podcast, first look.
I'll say that for the rescheduled match on Saturday night, the big blockbuster up at the Gabba, a lot of people think that Geelong are going to lose because it is against Brisbane and up there. But I've got the line at the moment is plus 13 for Geelong to lose by two more goals. I'm going to take that line because I think Geelong will win. So that's at $1.90 at the moment. I think that's your best bet.
So that's not a part of your segment today.
No.
Okay, so that's an exclusive for you guys, all right? So there's your exclusive, but now let's get into my brother's bets for round 3.
Round 3 of the AFL starts with a big game under the lid. Essendon v Port Adelaide, which means I have a great same game multi ready for you guys. First leg is Mitch Georgiadis for 2+ goals. Second leg is Willie Rioli for 2+ goals. Third leg is Ollie Wines for 25+ disposals. And the final leg is Sam Durham for 20+ disposals, valued at $4.20. Now we get to our certainty bet of the week. This week I'm taking Clayton Oliver for 25+ disposals, valued at $1.41. And finally we get to my outside the boundary bet. This week I'm taking Darcy Wilmont for 25+ disposals, valued at $3.05. And as always guys, gamble responsibly.
So now let's get into a bit of AFL fantasy talk. Now, of course, we've done the review. You're here with me now. One quick word from you, of course, a massive week from you. Well, the first couple of weeks we'll give you that. This is the first time we've actually been able to talk since AFL Fantasy has officially started. You are in the top 1,000, nearly in the top 500. Mm-hmm. It's a good start from you. I realise though you only beat me by like 10 points this week, so it's only a couple of hundred points between what I'm in 10,000 ranked.
I was looking.
You're at 500, so it's actually pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be the difference between a couple of trades and a couple of captaincy calls going into the next couple of weeks. But at the moment, one word from you. Do you think you can win it from here?
Well, 100%.
It's a big call, but you think you can do something from here? I mean, I guess that's one thing I can ask you. What's your plans in the next couple of weeks for your fantasy team moving in?
I'm actually concerned about one player, and that is Christian Petrarca. He's very high up price-wise, and last week, obviously, he transferred forward for a bit.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to look at him, seeing if he plays more forward next week against the Gold Coast in the next couple of weeks, because they've got no targets.
Yeah.
So he's one of them, and probably Jason Horne-Francis for Port Adelaide. I think there's just a concern if he's not up there at the level that he showed in pre-season.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue, that they're going to maybe play him up forward a bit.
Yeah.
So, especially when Zach Butters comes back. That's why I feel like a game against Richmond, like you expect him to score 80, 90, especially in a game like that. Port Adelaide had so many more touches than Richmond. At one point, I think at half-time, they had like 120 more disposals.
I think it was nearly double.
Yeah, it was
what
nearly
it
double.
was. It's like, that's amazing to think.
Yeah, but Jason Horne-Francis still didn't get enough of it. So, who's one player at the moment that you don't have in your team that you want to try and get in?
Tristan Sherry.
Yeah.
I always wanted. I couldn't get him. He's too much. But he's very hard because he plays one sort of shitty game, like gets a 90, and then the next week he's up to 150 again, and you can't. And his price just won't plummet.
Yeah. I feel like that's my I had him in my team for the majority of the pre-season, and then I saw the round 1 matchup against the Giants, and I'm like, I'll go with Gawn. He's a little bit cheaper. And then Gawn had a poor week last week, so Gawn will come good, but Cherry just seems like the consistent one you go for. And another one as well is Rowan Marshall.
Yeah, that's the one also, because obviously week 1, coming off not a great pre-season, not playing a lot.
Yeah, not injury issues.
Yeah.
But then he comes in round 2 for a sole ruck and shows why he's one of the best.
Yeah, it shows why he's that ruckman that you need in your team.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a ruckman defender sort of last couple of years. Those are the two positions you need to get high-priced players in.
Yeah.
And just hope your other midfielders and forwards come along.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that Tom McConaughey's had a really good start to his season.
Yeah.
Hopefully Pidenet doesn't come in, but we'll have to see how that plays out. The one player I will be looking at, though, is Nick Dacos. He has dropped in the first 2 weeks. He didn't score over 100. But I think after they have the bye this week, then they have a game against Carlton, and then they have Sydney. I feel like with a couple of tags against Carlton and the Swans, I feel like after that point, his fixture kind of opens up. So after that point, probably coming up to the positional changes, I think that's when I can pick him up. He'll probably be under $1 million by that point.
Have you seen some of the sneak peeks of who could get like forward status and stuff?
I haven't yet.
There's one person. Someone's posted it for like the 6 players they think could possibly get forward status, and one of them is Zach Merritt.
If Zach Merritt gets it, I would be fucking.
Everybody would be running at it.
I mean, the thing is, when he kicks 4 goals, it makes it look a little bit better. But I mean, Essendon need like 4 of him. So if Zach Merritt does get forward status, I mean, that'd be awesome. But I feel like he plays too much midfield. Maybe Brad Scott will be like, look,
You're doing too much. Just chuck him in at full forward.
Yeah.
He'll still kick him 3 goals anyway. He'd probably be like their highest goal scorer at the
But
moment.
he's already kicked. I swear he kicked one against Hawthorn week 1, didn't he?
I'm pretty sure he would have got one.
Well, he's already so he's on.
So he'd be up there in the Coleman
Yeah.
race. That's a big bet. Is that a call for you for your betting segment?
Oh,
Zach
yeah,
Merritt
yeah.
for Coleman?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's get into the rest of the review for AFL Fantasy Round 2.
Now, I had an okay week. I wouldn't say it was amazing. In the end, I scored 1,840 points. Not too bad. If I'm looking at the team that I had, I like obviously the great scores of Dawson and Rosie. I did take the vice-captain score from Rosie with the 290 in the end. Will Ashcroft, I'm still a little bit questioning on him at the moment. He did score 90. However, that was a lot of it in the second half. In the first half, he didn't really do that great. So I'm still a bit worried about him. On players that I wasn't really expecting to do that well, but did pretty well in the end so far. Joel Frazier, 75. I like that score. Max Holmes, he got tagged, so I'm going to take 77. That's not the greatest, but I will take it. O'Driscoll has really impressed me so far this year for the Dockers, 79. He's averaged, I think it's 82 in his first 2 weeks, so loving that. Xavier Lindsay in his first game for my team got 80, so I'll take that every day of the week. And Tom de Koning just continues to show his great form as a ruckman, 107 from him. Now on to some players that I wasn't too impressed by. First of all, Max Gawn had an absolute shocker against Cherry, 63. I had a choice to go between him and Cherry at the start of the season. I went with Gawn because his first matchup was insanely good up against the Giants, and he did that really well last week, but this week had a very poor performance. Jason Horne-Francis, I don't know what's happened to him. In his first couple of weeks, he's been very poor. 62, I just need more than that from him, especially against the Tigers. They played him forward, which made me very unhappy as well, but hopefully he can come good, or else I'm going to have to get rid of him the next couple of weeks. Same with Riley Sanders. In the preseason, the Bulldogs absolutely cucked us around with this shit. They played him in the midfield, and now all of a sudden he's playing up forward. He got 69 in the end, but he needs to be playing midfield, in my opinion, I think, for his career, to be honest. But AFL Fantasy-wise, he definitely needs to be playing midfield. Hugo Garcia, great start to the preseason for him. Played as the midfield, was in the midfield core, they're 3. He was getting a lot of CBAs. Played as the sub on the weekend, and they won. So he's not moving anywhere from that position. 27 from him. Not good enough as the sub. And then Harry Perryman, I don't know what's happened to him. In his first game, in the opening round, he scored, 90? Was brilliant. Played in those preseason games as a midfielder, and now all of a sudden they've fuck him off to the back line and play as a defender or whatever. And he's got 40s in the first 2 games. So he's my number one priority to get out. But nonetheless, 1840, I'll take that. That's the best 18 score. It's averaging over about 100. But we have to talk about the big score. The pig is back, I'd like to say. Jack McRae, 153, was absolutely outstanding on the AFL fantasy front and for the Saints as well. He was outstanding, 153, 34 touches I think it was, just racking them up, and he's back. Going into next week, we'll talk about the next week's team in a moment, but big watch on him going in against the Tigers. Now, of course, my brother has been doing very well in AFL Fantasy so far this year. He scored 1,874, so not too much better than me, but still pretty decent. Looking at his team at the moment, he had good scorers from Dawson and Rosie as well. He did have Peatling, which wasn't the greatest. He had Nankervis as well, who didn't do very well. He didn't have a massive difference to my team, I'll be honest. He didn't really have a massive difference. He had the same vice-captain sort of decision as well. Jordan Clark and Short did well for him, while I had a couple of poorer scorers. And Tristan Petrarca, probably a lot of money to pay for a guy who only got 89 in the end. But the fact is, he still did good enough. He's 582 right now, ranking in the AFL fantasy world. So he's doing very well at the moment. The one player that I do know he's already looking to get rid of, we'll get to the trades in a moment, but James Peatling hasn't had a great start for the Crows, AFL fantasy-wise. I think he only scored about 60 in his first game. He had 40 in a game where they dominated. So looks like he'll be the first player to get out. And then he's got a couple of the same issues as me with Jason Horne-Francis and Riley Sanders. But at this moment, I think James Peatling, as he probably knows, is the one to get rid of at this stage. Let's move to both of our trades for this week. So my trades going into round 3, I've got rid of Harry Perryman. Had enough of him. Fuck him off. I should have got rid of him last week, but I thought I have to get rid of Luke Cleary. So I held on to him for an extra week, but the buy, he's gone.
I have picked up Sam De Koning. Now, there is a bit of talk that maybe not to go for him because he's got a couple of tough matchups as a ruckman in the next couple of weeks. But I am going to go with him. I still think he's got a lot of price to go up. So De Koning's came in. And then on the second trade, I've got rid of Hugo Garcia and I've picked up Closey. Now, Garcia, like I said, started as the sub for St Kilda last week and they won. I don't think they're going to... He's either going to go out of the team or he's going to be the sub again. So I don't think that there's a point in keeping him in the team. And even in his first performance for St Kilda, he had quite a few CBAs and still only scored 59. So I'm happy to get rid of him at the moment. And I've picked up Closey. Now, he started as a sub for Geelong. He did come on pretty early because of the injury to Tom Stewart, but he scored 91 in the end. Now, that may change that trade depending on if there's another forward that I potentially choose from. But I liked his performance. He was really tough. Was all around the ground, in my opinion. He was one of the Geelong's best players, especially in the second and third quarters when Geelong was still not at their best until the last term. So I like the look of Closey. Hopefully he gets some games for Geelong. But at this stage, those are my two trades. Saving up some money because I'm going to be making a big trade next week, hopefully. I'll keep that one in my back pocket for the moment, though. So moving to my brother's trades, he has gone James Peatling out for Nevitt, and he's got rid of Matt Roberts for Kane Farrell. So, like I said, Peatling had to go. That's pretty obvious. Mitch Nevitt's actually been very good in the first couple of games of the season for Geelong. He scored 100 in his first game, scored 80 in his second game. So, brilliant start from him. He's around that price of O'Driscoll, which I've already got. So, I'll probably look at getting Nevitt, but I think now it's probably a little bit too far away for me. So I may keep that one in mind, but that's kind of away for me. I'm surprised he got rid of Matt Roberts. So I'll have to ask him why he's got rid of Matt Roberts, but he's picked up Kane Farrell. Farrell has had a good start since Dan Houston obviously was gone. However, interested to see how he goes in next week as well. He had a really good performance against Richmond, but let's be honest, I think everyone just banked out on Richmond last week for Port. But I do think a lot of teams this year are going to bank out on the Tigers. Which brings me to next week. Before we get into our league rankings and all that sort of stuff, I will be looking at my team going into next week. So, first of all, I've put the vice captain on Jack McRae. He's playing the Tigers, St Kilda playing the Tigers, obviously. He scored 153 against Geelong, which is a pretty hard team to score against. I think he goes massive this week, Jack McRae. I mean, in his best years at the Bulldogs, he scored 120 pluses nearly every week. So if he can score a 153 for the Saints, he's coming up against, I think, the easiest team to score against this year will be the Tigers. I think he's in for a massive game. He's going to go as vice captain. The reason why I'm not going to go with captain is because I'm a big pussy and I'm just going to hold back on giving him captain status at this stage. I'm going to give it to Dawson. They play North Melbourne this week. The game after they play on Sunday, while St Kilda play on Saturday. So I will give the vice to McRae. However, Dawson against North Melbourne is going to be a massive game as well. So if Jack McRae doesn't score too well, I want to get 110 plus at least to consider taking his vice captain score because I think Dawson's in for a massive game against North. I think maybe Phillips could go to Dawson as a tag. However, I think he's too good for it. He'll go forward and kick goals against North. And they were good last week, the Kangaroos, but Dawson's going to go big, I think, in this week as well. Hopefully I haven't mozzed the both of them. But finally, let's talk about our AFL Fantasy League. So we do have one for the channel. And in the first week, surprisingly, we had the number one AFL Fantasy scorer for round one. Pub Feed with Sauce was the top of the table after round one. And at the moment, he is in second spot overall. So he actually came into the comments last week and was saying, I'll keep it up the good work or something like that. So hopefully he keeps on going. Unfortunately, he dropped down. So unfortunately, he may have actually listened to some of our advice. Don't listen to our advice, bro. Okay? You do what you need to do. All right? Anyway, he is still in top spot in our league, of course. My brother is in third. So he jumped up from fourth to third this week. I've actually jumped up as well. I was I think, in the 30s last week. I've jumped up to 24th. So that's not too bad considering we have 80 people in the competition. I mean, my goal probably is to beat my brother because he's been a real cocky shit the last couple of weeks. So if I can jump in front of him, he's only 120 in front of me. So I mean, he's getting a little cocky over 120 points. That's what Dawson scored. All right. So if I can get it, if he stops copying me, obviously that's what he always does. But anyway, but that really is everything we have for the review for AFL Fantasy this week, guys. Make sure to let us know down below what trades you're going to be making, what sort of captaincy and what sort of changes you're going to be making to your team this week.
And finally, guys, we get to our fan favourite segment, of course, the Flog of the Week. Now, this week it's been a bit difficult. I have been looking around and trying to find the perfect candidate for this week's Flog of the Week. We've had a few already. Mitch Cleary did have it at one point a couple of episodes ago, but that was stolen by Andrew Dillon because of the fixture fuck up with opening round. But don't worry, Mitch Cleary's got this week's vote. Good on him. I'm really proud of him. He won last year's. He's trying to go back to back. Do you remember what this is about?
No, I can't.
I remember you sent me this. So this is regarding a clip from him and Sam McClure's podcast.
Oh, yes,
now the fact that this gets more views than us is fucking deplorable from both of you, from all of you guys who watch that. If any of you guys watch that or any of your mates watch it, fucking tell them to fuck off and watch it. Just give us a view.
Or send us the great content that they fucking talk about.
Actually send us that, because that would be really good for our podcast just to react to theirs. But anyway, this week they were on their podcast talking about the Blues Hawthorn game and saying that West Coast have the biggest eye on this game regarding draft picks. So I'll play the clip for you. It only runs for about 30 seconds, and then I'll talk about why this is such a fucking bullshit take.
We're going to flock to the MCG Thursday night. But there's a team and a fan base 3,000 kilometres away who will be riding this game just as closely as Carlton and Hawthorn fans. When West Coast sent Tom Barrass to Hawthorn, the Hawks coughed up a future first rounder, a future second rounder and a future third rounder. At the time when Hawthorn did that deal to acquire Tom Barrass, they owned 2 first rounders, one of their own, one of Carlton's, and 2 second rounders, one of their own, one of Carlton's. And when they took Tom Barrass off West Coast hands, they said to the Eagles,
hurry up,
can take the
Mitch.
pick.
Fuck me.
West Coast said, thank you, we'll take Hawthorn, we'll take your first and second rounders instead of Carlton's. Now this Thursday night at the MCG, Carlton faces the prospect of starting 0-2, and Hawthorn would leave them 3-0 to start the season.
West Coast thought that Carlton would be better than Hawthorn in 2025.
Correct.
Some people may have thought that Hawthorn had a year where they were hit by reality.
Yep.
After the amazing run of last year, and that Carlton were a genuine premiership threat. Their bet at the moment doesn't look that good.
West Coast fans, the footy club will be sitting on the edge of their seats watching that game from 3,000 kilometres away.
So, first of all, I don't know if Mitch knows this. I mean, you'd feel like he would because he's a part of the industry, but the draft for 2025 is in November. I feel like he knows that. Now, hopefully he does, because that's when the draft comes up. Secondly, this game is not going to... That game did not decide where either team's going to finish, by the way, either. Now, I feel like West Coast fucked up that trade when they did trade away a future pick for Matt Owies. I don't think they should have done that. Or, sorry, a pick for Matt Owies like that. Didn't need to do that. Matt Owies was already going to go, so I think West Coast fucked up on that front. But there is no fucking way that the list manager at fucking West Coast is sitting there with fucking sweaty palms during that game going, oh fuck, come on Carlton, win this game please. The draft pick that we used! Shut up, Mitch. Absolutely fucking dumb cunt energy from you. I don't know if this is going to win you the Flog of the Year, because it's a low... You've hit a pretty low bar to try and beat. But absolute Flog energy trying to make some sort of content out of a draft pick that was made fucking 3 months ago and is not really watchable for another 5 or 6 months. I think it's just fucking ridiculous.
If this game happened in August, then maybe.
Yeah, maybe I'd give you a point of like, yeah, fair enough. Looking at it, yeah, I mean, maybe looking at that, maybe West Coast would give a fuck.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't think the Eagles give 2 fucks. I feel like they've got a lot more issues on their field than they have to deal with. And their fans, by the way. You think fucking one West Coast fan is sitting there going, fuck me. I mean, we've got Brisbane this week. This could be a tough contest. I'm really interested to see how our team goes. But you know what I'm more interested in? The Carlton-Hawthorn game. I'm going to be wearing my West Coast jumper, clinging onto my scarf, thinking, fucking hell, come on, Carlton, please win this game of football. Fucking hell. Anyway, the nominee for the Flog of the Week this week, of course, like we said, Mitch Cleary for that great take. And Sam McClure sitting there just going, oh, Mitch, you're so good, bro. Great content for the podcast. You're a fucking... Oh. Fucking hell. Sam McClure, I'm sure he'll get a nomination sometime this year. Anyway, but that's the Flog of the Week this week, guys. And that is the end of the podcast for episode 106. Really appreciate you guys listening and watching today. If you guys did watch over on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you are over on Spotify, make sure to leave us 5 stars and make sure to follow us. You're notified on the podcast and the review every single week. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you all next week.
See you later, guys.